Welcome, everyone, to our program this evening. I am Christine Olson, newly elected president of the Board of Directors, succeeding our past president, Erica Lorenz, to whom we are grateful for many years of service. Thank you, Erica. And thank you all for being here as we continue together to consider the meaning and relevance that depth psychology has for our lives today. I want to update you on some developments in our organization. While I'm speaking, if you have not already done so, this is a good time to make your donation. If you're like me, you prefer being in person and dropping a bill into a basket, but now we use PayPal, which requires finding your credit card, filling in the form, et cetera, et cetera. And all this is a small reminder of very large changes in culture that we have endured in the last 2.5 years. Prior to the pandemic, meeting live at Smith College, we achieved a happy balance where your donations covered our expenses. This is no longer the case. Only about 1/3 of our audience chips in these days, and the board is working to find solutions to this precipitous shortfall that this has created. Next month, in the reminder emails, you will notice a register button instead of a donation prompt. It will take you to a page with payment options that we hope will boost our income stream and at the same time will ensure that the lectures remain accessible to all. We look to you, the community we serve, to chip in, yes, with your dollars, and also with your ideas and experience in fundraising. Who among you has skills in this area and would enjoy consulting with us? My name and email is in the chat, so please be in touch. Remember, from last month, we are all in this together. For upcoming programs, I'm very happy to say that we will return to Smith College and be live and in person for 2 of our lectures in the new year. In February, Ed Tick, and in May, Jason Smith. These programs will be in a hybrid format to include both our live and Zoom audiences. For next month, November, tune in here for Miguel Rivera and his presentation, Connecting to the Roots, inviting us out of the confining spirit of the times and into the spirit of the depths, and into recommunion with nature. I'm turning it over now to Ed Tick, who will introduce Penny Tarasuk and also has an announcement for us.
Good evening, friends. Thank you very much, Chris. Thank you for your wise and comprehensive introduction to our organization and the changes. And thank you for publicly honoring and thanking Erica, you, Erica. We all are grateful to you for the years of devoted service and thankless tasks that you did for all of us to keep this organization alive and well. So bless you and thank you. So good evening, my friends. I am Ed Tick. I am an advisory board member and regular lecturer of our association. Before I introduce our host, Penelope, tonight, I briefly want to invite you to a workshop I will be giving a week from Saturday. So Saturday morning, October 15th from 9 to 12:30. Some of us have shared my explorations of our condition living in the apocalypse. I'm going to give an intensive 3-hour lecture and workshop on that, on living in the apocalypse, and how we can understand it, how we can make it conscious, and how we can evoke our community and spiritual practices to do well even under these. So if you're interested in joining me, just go to Connecticut Jung, just ctjung.org on the internet. And also, let's, not just this program, but let's support our neighbors doing the same kind of work and continue to knit our world together with depth psychology and community. So I'm very pleased and honored to introduce tonight's host, my friend and my colleague, Dr. Penelope Tarasuk. And I'd just like to share a few wonderful things about Penelope. Penelope hugs trees. Penelope paints butterflies. Penelope talks to the sky. And Penelope also works to realign our value systems for living by and teaching what is really most essential and important. So thank you and bless you, Penelope.
Thank you.
She's a Jungian analyst in private practice in the Valley. She works with individuals, couples, and families. She's written a book called Polishing the Bones. If you want to know what real deep, intensive, exacting Jungian analysis is, it's a wonderful book to explore that. And she's on the, she's a senior training analyst in the institutes in the Boston Jung Institute. She's been a board member and lecturer of this association for many years, and she really loves to bring visions of wholeness, creativity, and integrity to all of us, to her clients, and to the community. So, and Penelope has in recent years been exploring and pioneering the exploration with others of flow forms of consciousness, altered states of consciousness that bring us closer to each other and nature and to the divine. And she's been sharing that with us over the years and will continue to do so. We need this expertise. We're all seeking for that reconnection, and Penelope is a leader and integrator in providing it. So thank you. Bless you, Penelope, and evening's yours.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I invite you to relax into watching a video, and I'll tell you why I decided to do this. Two reasons. One, I've been very vulnerable these last months and probably headed into a knee replacement or something. So talking about polishing the bones, geez. Anyway, I thought it wise to honor my body. And so I've been vulnerable. So I've been taking it a little easier, a little differently. So in doing that, I watched the video of Anne Baring. Erica had sent it to me and a number of people, and it's a beautiful video, which I thought it would be wonderful to share that with you. There are a number of reasons, but one of which is Anne Baring is a 91-year-old British woman whose mother was American, I believe, and father was British, and she's been living in Britain for most of her life. Anyway, I reached out to her and she gave me full permission to use this film and was very, very excited and said, well, I'd be happy to present it and answer questions. And then she said, well, it's 5 hours difference time, and at 91 years old, she needs her rest too. So she said, go forth with it, enjoy it. And so with her permission and her support and her enthusiasm, I'd like you to see this film, and then we're going to have breakout groups to discuss it. There's a number of reasons I want you to watch this. I think she provides the history, the research, a context of understanding a cultural context in the most historic way, and to understand the, well, more of an original feminist matriarchal culture, which then was oppressed and now is highly, as you know, we're really in the midst of such trauma around the way women are treated and women's bodies are treated. So the name of this film is The Birth of a New World. And as I spoke with Anne about it, she said she's also doing more writing and work on women's bodies, and she's going to write on menopause as well. So another reason is that in the film, Anne refers many times to the shamanic way, the more lunar consciousness of the shamanic way. And late in the film, she refers to a colleague, Christopher Bache, who wrote LSD in the Mind of the Universe. And I was very surprised to hear Anne speaking about Christopher's work on LSD, because not many Jungian analysts really are talking about that at this point. So perhaps when we finish watching the film, that can be part of the discussion. But there are a number of reasons I decided this would be a very good context for moving forward. And the next time I talk, I will talk more personally about my continued education in non-ordinary states of consciousness and working with certain psychedelics. And it looks like 2023, we might see legalization of possibly MDMA, and psilocybin will follow. And Connecticut is going to do an expanded access program with psilocybin this coming year. So it's moving faster, the legalization process. So we will be talking more about this. And interesting, several Jungians are kind of reaching out to me and wanting to talk about this privately. So I'm encouraged. So just a few more things about Anne before we launch in. She's a researcher, scholar, a Jungian analyst, and a cosmic poet. After her degree at Ubiquity University with a BA in Oxon in 1953, she went on to do 60 years of research in psychology, history, politics, mythology, ecology, and fairy tales, and alchemy. In her biographical material, she talks about being depressed particularly as an adolescent, severe depression, even suicidal depression. And after the birth of her first baby, she had a very severe postpartum depression, and that fortunately led her to doing Jungian analysis with someone. I don't know who her analyst was, but after her analysis, she decided to train as a Jungian and went on to become an analyst in one of the British associations for over 15 years, or approximately 15 years. For 30 years, she's been a member of the Scientific and Medical Network and has frequently lectured for them. It took 10 years for her to write her first book, The Myth of the Goddess. And I'd like to say that the one that I've concentrated on is The Dream of the Cosmos, A Quest for the Soul. And the people who helped her, it took 15 years to write the book. Much of the material for the film comes out of that. I highly recommend this book. And she's also very involved with the work of McGilchrist. And I think at some point, Erica will tell us more about that. Anyway, she's an incredibly active woman. She also had a period after being in India where she loved fabric and began designing beautiful, elegant dresses and had a business for a while. So she's a woman of many talents and quite a beautiful soul, highly, highly generous to let us see this tonight. So Andy, thank you for your technical help. Chris, Ed, Erica, Judy, thank you, board members, for all you do. And I will see you in the breakout rooms later. Thank you.
So it's not going to be easy to birth a new world, as I'm sure you realize. But more and more of us are feeling a profound love for the earth, our home in the vastness of the cosmos. This new experience, or relatively new experience of love and empathy, has the power to raise our consciousness to a higher level, bringing us into closer relationship with our soul and the higher reaches of the cosmos, and helping us to relinquish old beliefs, old habits, old struggles for power that are based on fear and ignorance rather than love. In Eckhart Tolle's words, the transformation of human consciousness is no longer a luxury available only to a few isolated individuals, but a necessity if humanity is not to destroy itself. Now, His Holiness the Dalai Lama calls for a new awakening in this book. And in relation to what we're witnessing in Russia's invasion of Ukraine, he has in the past said this about war. War and the large military establishments are the greatest sources of violence in the world. Whether their purpose is defensive or offensive, these vast but powerful organizations exist solely to kill human beings. We should think very carefully about the reality of war. War is monstrous. Its very nature is one of tragedy and suffering. On March 25th, together with other organizations and individuals, he sent out this message to the world. The time to ban and eliminate nuclear weapons is now. It is either the end of nuclear weapons or the end of us. And this brings me to Putin's nuclear weapon. On April 20th, and again on the 9th of May, President Putin was shown boasting about a new long-range Sarmat RS-28 intercontinental ballistic missile. This new weapon can travel 27 times faster than the speed of sound and has a range of over 6,000 miles. It can go over the poles, north or south poles. It carries 15 nuclear missiles, each capable of destroying an entire city. Released together to their different destinations, they could wipe out a country the size of Ukraine or France, which is roughly the same size as Ukraine. There is no defense against it. And I think we need to ask ourselves the question, how have we come to descend into this pit of depravity, to believe that it is morally acceptable under any circumstances to design and create such a weapon? I vividly remember Albert Schweitzer saying when he received the Nobel Prize for Peace in 1954, that in creating these weapons, we had lost our humanity. What we are watching in Russia's invasion of Ukraine are the death throes of the old patriarchal order, whose worst abuses are reflected in Picasso's agonized commemoration of the bombing of Guernica in 1937. For millennia, young men have been sent to fight and have nobly sacrificed their lives on behalf of their nation. But now, if we are to survive as a species, we have to outgrow this ancient habit. So what can we do? We can speak up for the highest moral values which serve and protect life. These values are ancient and universal, and they override loyalty to a nation or a government. Certain governments have betrayed these values by spending enormous sums in the last 75 years on accumulating nuclear and other weapons. They have done so ostensibly in the interests of defense, but also in order to gain greater power over other nations whom they see as rivals in the struggle for supremacy. We need to challenge the belligerent ambitions of the leaders of nations who still covertly prepare for war, spending immense sums of our money on weapons. We have to break the spell of this addiction to power that has inflicted intolerable suffering on humanity and the sacrifice of generations of young men over 4 millennia. Think of the anguish of mothers whose beloved sons do not return to them. Up to 21,000 young Russian men have died so far, 1,000 in one day last week. War is the most lethal wound to women who are the bearers and predominant carers of life. Nobody thinks of mothers when they send men to war. This extraordinary time we're living in is giving us an opportunity to recover the forgotten values which serve and protect life, and so to birth a new world. We are witnessing both the death throes of the old patriarchal order and the birth of a new order that renounces the horror of war and the struggle for power between nations. Change is coming, slowly, very slowly, but it's inevitable owing to the increasing pressure of climate change. But we need to understand the long historical process that has led us to this crucial time of awakening and choice, which is also a time of judgment for the whole of humanity. Judgment by the cosmos, if you like, or by whoever is directing the cosmos. In this talk, I will take you back many thousands of years so that you can understand where, when, and why we went wrong, and the radical change of consciousness that is needed now in order to birth a different world. To begin with, we will look at the cosmology of the Paleolithic and Neolithic eras, when the cosmos was imagined as a mother, from whose womb all forms of life emerged in a continuous cycle of birth, death, and regeneration. For tens of thousands of years, the ground from which life arose and to which it returned was maternal. What we call now cosmos and nature was a living web of relationships ensouled by the Great Mother. Life was an organic, living, and sacred whole, and we were part of that whole. The Milky Way was the starry passage by which souls entered and left this world, and the shamanic journey into non-ordinary states of consciousness was the spiritual experience throughout this long era, which could have lasted as long as 50,000 years. The most important idea about this time is that there was no creator beyond creation, no separation between the Great Mother as source or womb and the myriad forms of her life. The Great Mother was both the starry cosmos and all life on earth, and all forms of life were her children. Everything was infused with divinity because each and all were part of her sacred cosmic order. And woman was revered because, like nature, the Great Mother, she was the carrier of new life. Now, the cosmology of what I call the Lunar Era, this very early era, was focused on a cyclical process of birth, death, and regeneration that arose from the age-old observation of the recurring phases of the moon, its birth as the crescent, its waxing to fullness, and its waning into the 3 days of darkness. Out of that darkness, the crescent was continually reborn. So light and darkness, life and death were not polarized as they were to become in the subsequent era, but were two phases of a total cycle, always leading to regeneration and a new cycle. Through an expanded consciousness assisted by shamanic practices and the use of sacred plants, people in the Lunar Era saw their lives as part of the great cosmic cycle of birth, death, and renewal, and knew that although the body died, their soul would take on a new form in another life. They saw the whole of nature as alive with spirit, and they knew how to communicate with water, with trees, with stones, as well as animals, plants, and birds, and how to keep in touch with the ancestors. They had an enhanced participatory consciousness that we, unfortunately, have now lost. Now we can follow the image of the Great Mother into the Neolithic era, 8,000, because 8,000 years ago, and I think this is a fascinating part of what I want to tell you, 8,000 years ago, there was an extraordinary, very early civilization that developed in a large part of Europe, mostly Eastern Europe. It included Romania and Bulgaria, Moldova and Ukraine, as well as southern Italy, Malta, Greece, and Crete. This Neolithic civilization was matrilineal, agricultural, and peaceful. People lived in harmony with nature and worshipped the Great Mother. Now it lasted for 3,000 years. That's 1,000 years longer than our own era. From 6,500 BC until 3,500 BC, there is no evidence of conflict and territorial aggression or defensive hill fortifications. There are no burials of men with weapons. There is no evidence of hierarchy. As I say, this was a matrilineal, not a matriarchal, but a matrilineal society. It was a highly creative and artistic civilization that left a strong cultural legacy in southeastern Europe, that we can still see traces of today, particularly in Crete and Malta. The Lithuanian archaeologist Marija Gimbutas was the first person to reveal the marvels of this hitherto unknown, undiscovered civilization, and she wrote 2 wonderful books about it called The Civilization of the Goddess and The Language of the Goddess. She was ridiculed by other archaeologists in the most ferocious manner for decades, and I think she died of grief and the pain of this. But she was finally vindicated in 2018 in a lecture in Chicago given by Lord Colin Renfrew, who was sort of one of the leading archaeologists. So here is an image of the Great Mother dating to 5000 BC and found in Romania. A shamanic pathway symbolized by the labyrinth connected the 2 aspects of her being, her earthly being and her cosmic being. At death, people took this pathway to return to her womb, to be reborn in a new cycle of life. Now, here are some magnificent examples of the kind of pottery that was made by these people. A few years ago, I saw them at an exhibition called The Civilization of Old Europe at the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford. And I was absolutely stunned by their beauty and also by their huge size. Some of them are almost 2 feet or even over 2 feet wide and as tall as well. There must be similar ones in a museum in Kyiv. I've recently learned that in the early part of the last century, a Russian-Ukrainian archaeologist called Vikenty Kuvoyka discovered thousands of tiny images of women or goddesses in Ukraine, as well as large, well-made temples and houses. His discoveries didn't fit with the mindset of the Soviet Union, and so, like the discoveries of Gimbutas, they were ignored for decades. He found these people were agriculturalists, extraordinary potters, blacksmiths, goldsmiths, and coppersmiths, and consummate weavers. He found the largest amount of worked gold that has been found anywhere. And he found many images of enthroned women like this one, or goddesses like this one from Romania, and images of men with exquisite expressions, carvings of stone so beautifully made that one can see the tenderness of the hands that hold the baby. Every object used in every aspect of life is lovingly ornamented with all the symbols of nature, and with circles and crosses and endless meanders, which was one of the main symbols that they used on these gigantic pots. Now, this is very important because the peaceful agricultural civilization of old Europe, which included Ukraine, was brought to an end by 3 successive incursions of Kurgan, or Proto-European tribes, from 3500 BC to 1500 BC. These came down from the Russian steppes, of all places, bringing with them the horse, lethal weapons, and the war chariot. And they spread south and west into Europe and east towards Turkey, Iran, and ultimately India, where they established themselves in a very powerful civilization. They brought with them the patriarchal order, sky gods, and the hierarchical organization of society, with a warrior leader or a priest at the top. And this whole period, from certainly 3500 onward, this was the origin of the patriarchal order, which we're still stuck in today. And all trace of that civilization vanished until Marija Gimbutas and Vikenty Kuvoyka restored it to life. So moving forward, we can follow the image of the Neolithic Great Mother as she becomes the great goddesses of the Bronze Age. Goddesses such as Isis in Egypt, Inanna in Sumer, and Artemis of Ephesus there on the right, in that superb statue which is in the Archaeological Museum in Naples. All of these were worshipped as the Queen of Heaven and associated with the moon. And you can see the great lunar crescent on Artemis's breast there, which has got a frieze of acorns just above it. For many thousands of years, the Great Mother and these great goddesses personified the principle of relationship, the interconnectedness of every aspect of life, and above all, the sacredness of the great web of life that we call nature, because they represented nature. The primary question of the Lunar Era was, how should the human community act so as to be in harmony with the life of the cosmos? This is the question we have forgotten and should be asking ourselves now. Plato, in his Timaeus, was the first to give a name to an all-embracing cosmic entity, which he described as a single living creature that encompasses all the living creatures that are within it. He called it the soul of the cosmos. The priceless legacy of this whole era was the shamanic experience that the cosmos has an inner life, a soul, and that humans can communicate with it and derive their laws from listening to its voice. The pre-Socratic philosophers Pythagoras and Parmenides were masters of shamanic communication. And you can read a wonderful book by a friend of mine called Peter Kingsley called In the Dark Places of Wisdom, which describes the work and the shamanic experience of Parmenides. So we carry within our psyche, even today, a very ancient kind of consciousness or experience of life that I call lunar consciousness, and associate with the timeless wisdom of the soul. It is an instinctive, feminine, participatory, relational way of knowing, mediated through the heart, enhanced sensory observation and intuition, that opens the path between two dimensions of reality. We need to reconnect with this lost consciousness, principally through the right hemisphere of the brain and the heart, and learn to listen again to what Jung called the spirit of the depths and the voice of the soul. Now we come to the solar era, which started around 2000 BC and has gone up right to the present day. And it's the era which separated us from nature, and when the Great Father replaced the Great Mother. So it's a 4,000-year-long period, perhaps a little longer, 4,500 if you want to be exact. So moving on to the subsequent solar era, which has lasted over 4,000 years, we find a cosmology that is radically different from that of the lunar era. It is a cosmology of separation, characterized by dissociation, duality, fragmentation, and polarization, which resulted from the conflict between cities and nation states. During this era, the Great Father replaced the Great Mother as the sole image of deity. And because of this, we lost the participatory consciousness that we'd had in the lunar era, and the sense that we lived within a sacred order, an insight that has only survived to our time in the indigenous cultures of the world. The focus of this whole era is on the establishment of the patriarchal order, led by male warrior leaders, such as Alexander the Great, or Caesar, if you like, together with the male priesthoods that exist to this day. But it is also about a violent and traumatic separation from the deeper matrix of the soul, or psyche, and a severance of our relationship with nature, cosmos, and earth. The rapid growth of the population facilitated the drive for territorial conquest, led by warrior kings who presided over immense empires. There were at least 7 of these empires, and these were built on the enslavement of conquered peoples. With this rise of nations and empires came the idea of power over others, and how a certain territory belonged to a specific group. Conquering more territory involved killing and enslaving others. This was just taken for granted. This was the pattern that existed then. This new male quest for territory, power, and the renown of the conqueror, because that was the aim of all these solar heroes. They wanted to be the most famous warrior of all, so to speak. But it destroyed the old lunar relationship with a harmonious cosmic order. The brutal invasion of Ukraine by Putin, or the invasion of Iraq by the US and the UK, arrogantly named Operation Shock and Awe, disgraceful really, or a reenactment of the pattern of war and conquest that has extended through 4 millennia. To the political leader in the grip of an archetypal inflation, the death and suffering of millions means nothing in relation to the power and territory acquired through conquest. And that applies as much to America and England in that war as it does to Putin now. With the loss of the Great Mother and the Goddess, Western civilization developed on the foundation of a fundamental dissociation between spirit and nature, creator and creation. This dissociation destroyed the sacredness of nature and the ancient shamanic ability to connect with the soul of the cosmos. It also destroyed our ability to recognize the presence of spirit within the material world. We lost our psychic abilities in a sense, opening the way to its exploitation. It was during this era that we lost touch with the voice of the soul. Now, two immensely powerful and polarizing cosmologies became the major influence on the social, political, and religious history of Western civilization. And the first of these cosmologies was the battle between light and darkness, good and evil, symbolized by the hero's fight for the dragon, with the dragon. This cosmology projected into the world would lead to endless struggles for power. Ultimately, it would lead to the battle to conquer and subjugate nature, identified with the dragon unconsciously, in the service of man. In the patriarchal religions, the feminine archetype associated with the goddess was split off from transcendent spirit. Spirit did not include nature. Nature and the earth were therefore no longer sacred, and man became identified himself with spirit, light, and order, and he identified woman with nature, darkness, and chaos, in summing it up as it happened. 4,000 years ago, man assumed a position of dominance over nature and woman. Woman's voice was silenced. Her former ancient role as priestess and healer was forbidden, and her sole value consisted in her being the carrier of man's seed. This archaic belief still prevails among the Taliban in Afghanistan, who have prevented girls over 12 from attending school and reimposed the wearing of the hated burqa. So you can see how this has survived right up to the present day in certain communities. I may say this started in the Middle East, this whole process. It started with the great empires, and the Babylonian and Assyrian empires, and then the Persian, the Greek and the Roman, one after the other. The key theme of the solar era is ascent to the light and repudiation of the darkness associated with nature. The development of the conscious mind and humanity as a whole, together with its stupendous cultural and scientific achievements, can be recognized as the evolutionary achievement of the solar era. But this achievement was built on the widening chasm that opened between transcendent spirit and nature or matter. This whole process was closely tied into the invention of writing and the power that literacy gave to an elite group of very powerful rulers and priesthoods who deliberately destroyed the shamanic practices and rituals of the older lunar order. I regret to say that Christianity was responsible for destroying very much of this shamanic wisdom, as it were. So as the image of deity changed from Great Mother to Great Father, and the divine feminine was banished from the image of God, our relationship with nature was severed. None of the patriarchal religions taught their followers that we are part of the earth's life, and that the earth is part of a sacred cosmic order. In fact, I doubt if they thought about the earth at all. They were too busy thinking about transcendence and how to get to heaven, and how to make their congregations conscious of the need to transcend the earthly order, as it were. Particularly, also sexuality was part of that thing that had to be rejected. So this led to the gradual de-souling of the world and the crisis that we face now. But there was a second polarizing cosmology that accelerated the loss of the Great Mother and the Great Goddess, and with it our relationship with nature. And this was the myth of the fall of man described in Genesis 2 and 3, not Genesis 1, only Genesis 2 and 3. An enormous change in Hebrew cosmology took place in 621 BC, when a group of priests called Deuteronomists took control of the first temple in Jerusalem. Prior to this, the Jewish people had worshipped both a goddess and a god, a queen and king of heaven, who together had created the world. The queen of heaven, whose name was Asherah, was worshipped as the Holy Spirit and divine wisdom, and also as the tree of life, a cosmic tree connecting the invisible and visible worlds, whose fruit was the gift of immortality. Now, those Deuteronomists eradicated all trace of the goddess, taking her statue and that of the great bronze serpent that symbolized her power to regenerate life out of the temple, and they cut down her sacred groves of trees and smashed all images of her. And then they set up their own law, which was based on the law of Moses, so they said. And they then, very cleverly, they were very clever, created the myth of the fall, downgrading the goddess into the human figure of Eve, and bestowing on Eve the former title of the goddess, mother of all living. In this way, the Jewish people lost the image of their goddess, leaving Yahweh as the sole creator God. The only place where the teaching and rituals of the first temple managed to survive was in the later mystical teaching of Kabbalah, known as the voice of the dove and the jewels of the heavenly bride. Now, I only know this because of the research by a wonderful woman called Dr. Margaret Barker, who's written many books about this. She's in the process of writing another that will be shortly published, but it was only through her that I learned of this and what happened in 621 BC and how the goddess was lost and how there was once upon a time a male and a female co-creating the world. Anyway, Christianity adopted this monotheistic image of God from Judaism, as well as the myth of the fall in Genesis 2 and 3. Fast forward to AD 325, when the Council of Nicaea officially created the Christian myth of Jesus as the celibate, immaculately conceived, only Son of God, whose sacrificial death had ensured our salvation and redemption from sin, that sin that was derived from the fall. At the same council, the third person of the Trinity, the Holy Spirit, was also defined as male, so there was no longer a feminine presence in the Godhead. Previously, in both the Hebrew and the Greek world, the Holy Spirit had been feminine. To confirm the divinity of Jesus in AD 451, the Virgin Mary was declared God-bearer or Theotokos. So you can see what an enormous change took place in adapting the Jewish tradition. What happened in Christianity was it lost the feminine archetype. It kept it to some extent with the Virgin Mary, but she was never elevated, at least not till 1950. She was never elevated to the position of the Godhead. So anyway, I thought we might be interested in all this. So in this new patriarchal cosmology, the sole image of deity is the transcendent Great Father. Divine immanence is lost. Earth is designated a place of exile and punishment for primordial sin, and it's no longer sacred. It's a place of punishment. Adam is given dominion over the animals, but he's no longer part of the divine order. He is banished to a world contaminated by the fall and subject to sin, suffering, and death, introduced into the world by the hapless Eve. Now, since Eve was the primary agent of the fall, and because this whole myth was taken literally as a divine revelation, nobody knew that it was the construction of the Deuteronomists. It was divine revelation, and it's remained that ever since. Anyway, Eve took the blame for our banishment from the Garden of Eden, and this led to the unrelenting persecution of women who had the heavy burden of the sin of Eve placed on them by the Christian fathers and generations of Christian priests, criticizing them from the pulpit, saying that they were sinful and the cause of all the trouble that has come in the world. And they were condemned to death at the stake by the Inquisition for consorting with the devil. Thousands of them were murdered in that way. So this immensely powerful myth is the main root of the misogyny that pollutes our culture to this day, giving rise to a deep unconscious suspicion, even a fear of women, and a consequent desire to control and silence them. Although great progress has been made over the last 100 years, women are still struggling to gain acceptance and to put an end to domestic violence and rape, which is far more prevalent today than it was 70 years ago when I was a young woman, which is a horrific fact, awful. This is all in the unconscious. It's not a conscious thing that people have absorbed, but it's there in the unconscious. From the perspective of our relationship with the earth, this myth and the loss of the goddess and the divine feminine was a disaster. Everything that was once associated with the divine feminine, nature, matter, sexuality, and the whole instinctual aspect of life, was excluded from the sacred. Once again, nature, split off from spirit, was effectively de-souled. We lost the awareness that spirit was active and present in the world, and we lost the sense of living within a sacred order. This myth imprinted us with a negative image of our presence on this planet and placed a heavy burden of shame and guilt, particularly sexual guilt, on our shoulders. I remember sitting in church as a little girl, absolutely hating that myth, and at last I've been able to get it off my shoulders. The monotheistic cosmology of the three patriarchal religions has led to the situation where the earth is no longer recognized as sacred, and we are confronted with the catastrophic effects of the loss of the divine feminine. From the time of the Crusades, the Christian Church in Rome pursued endless wars, conquests, and brutal conversions in the name of its God. We have recently acknowledged the evils of slavery, but it was a series of papal bulls from 1493, that is the time of the conquistadors, that gave the European nations permission to invade, capture, subdue, and enslave the indigenous populations and to seize all their lands and possessions. Those are the actual words of the papal bull. Because of this lamentable history of conquest and subjugation, Western civilization has been on the wrong path for more than 2,000 years, 4,000 in all, completely out of alignment with the earth and the cosmos. Now I come to the psyche, because what's happened is that our conscious mind, that tiny yellow triangle at the top of our total psyche, has become detached from the deeper matrix of the primordial soul, that's all the blue area, out of which it has evolved, and has become more and more inflated, thinking that it's the only person that, the only element that is of any importance, doesn't know about all this blue part down below. It no longer has any awareness of the psychic depths from which it has emerged, no relationship with nature or the cosmos. The psychiatrist C.D.G. Jung realized that as the conscious mind gained more and more autonomy in relation to the deeper matrix of the psyche, the whole superstructure of consciousness has become disengaged from the age-old matrix out of which it has emerged. Consciousness, thus torn from its roots, he said, possesses a Promethean freedom, but it also partakes of the nature of a godless hubris. So this is the primary trauma that we all carry, this separation of the conscious mind from the depths of the soul, that began with the rise of the powerful empires and priesthoods and the loss of the shamanic ability to journey into the inner life of the cosmos through altered states of consciousness. So belief doesn't cut it. You have to have the ability to journey into the soul, so to speak. The Czech psychiatrist Stanislav Grof has shown through his method of holotropic breathing that memories of trauma that were inflicted millennia ago are still held in the collective psyche. And Thomas Hübl has shown in his book, Healing Collective Trauma, how trauma is like a permafrost that causes us to recreate or reanimate the same events which caused catastrophe before. And we can see this with Putin, completely unconscious of what he's doing. So here's a diagram of Putin's psyche, if you like. possessed by the will to power of the shadow. When the conscious ego has no awareness of or relationship with the deeper matrix of consciousness, it can easily be taken over by what Jung called the shadow and the archetypal powers that exist in this unknown aspect of our nature. Above all, the will to power, coming from the instincts, the survival instincts. It is possible to view much that has happened in the world in the past century as a collective psychosis, a state of possession by our unconscious survival instincts, giving rise to the drive for power, control, and domination. One example of this psychosis was America's decision in 1945 to split the atom and develop the atomic and then the hydrogen bomb. From this came the nuclear race and the Cold War with the Soviet Union. From this also came the nuclear weapons developed by the other 7 nuclear powers, with Iran planning to become the 10th nation to develop this demonic weapon. Now we have Putin brandishing his gigantic nuclear weapon. We have been told that these weapons protect us, but they are the greatest threat to our survival, as the Dalai Lama has pointed out. Now, the Minotaur is a timeless image of what can happen to any one of us when the conscious mind is taken over by the will to power of the unconscious aspect of our nature. Technically, this is called archetypal inflation. We regress into predatory behavior, and one see that with what's happening now, how predatory it is, and how the prey, in this case Ukraine, has to fight for survival. When this happens, we will not hesitate to sacrifice whatever and whoever stands in our way in order to achieve our goal. And this applies to any of the so-called great powers of the world, but it also applies to any one of us who is determined to impose our will or the will of our group onto others. And we can see this quite clearly in our own society at the moment. When this happens, as this image illustrates, the feminine value is sacrificed. We lose the priceless evolutionary achievement of relationship with and respect for others. We become unable to listen to others and to hear their voice. So here's a quote from Jung, who said that God's powers have passed into our hands. The powers themselves are not evil, but in the hands of man they are an appalling danger, in evil hands. The splitting of the atom in 1945 was acclaimed as a great scientific advance. But from the perspective of a sacred order, it was a rape of nature and matter. The subsequent bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, obliterating the lives of millions of civilians, was an unforgivable crime against a helpless civilian population. It was at this point that, in Albert Schweitzer's words, we lost our humanity. My mother was warned in channeled messages at this time that the splitting of the atom would lead to the splitting of the human psyche and to mass insanity. And that insanity is reflected today in the ruthless struggle for power between the 3 great powers in the world, America, Russia, and China, each of which is still locked into the survival instincts which direct the drive for dominance, preeminence, and control through the stockpiling of weapons. What is missing in these polarizing situations of archetypal possession is the feminine principle, whose highest expression is the image of the Grail. Calling on this image of the sacred feminine can help us to disengage from a state of possession. And this is also where the mothers, speaking about their anguish and their anger at their sons being sacrificed in the hell of war, could also have a profound effect on defusing a polarized situation. I'm still hoping that the mothers of Russia will get together, as they did over Chechnya and also Afghanistan, and say, this is enough, we will not send our sons to fight in these wars. And it had the desired effect. What Russia withdrew in both cases. Over recent centuries, we've reached dazzling heights of scientific, medical, and technological advances which have transformed the physical conditions of our lives on this planet and facilitated a phenomenal expansion of our ability to express the creative genius of our species in many different areas and to communicate with each other. But we have also suffered a catastrophic loss of soul, a loss of the ancient awareness of the sacred interweaving of all aspects of life, a loss of the sense of participation in the life of nature and the life of the cosmos, and despite all our religions, a radical misunderstanding of the nature of God. The whole foundation of our lives is missing because we have become disconnected from the cosmos. The long process of our loss of relationship with nature and the cosmos, which has been for the most part unconscious, has led ultimately to the materialist or reductionist science that came into being over the last 3 centuries and controls our secular culture and academic life today. It has brought us enormous benefits through its many discoveries, but it has also banished the image of God and the soul, together with whatever it has defined as non-rational. It regards the body as a machine made up of separate parts rather than a miraculous integrated organism, and insists that consciousness originates in the neurons of the physical brain, so that when the brain dies, consciousness ceases to exist. It has concluded that we are the only sentient beings in a dead universe that is without meaning, purpose, or intelligence. We are basically biophysical machines with no free will. This bleak cosmology, taught in our schools and universities for over 100 years, has taken on the power and absolutism of an ideology, and no image describes it better than this painting of the Cyclops, or one-eyed giant, painted 100 years ago by Odilon Redon. In our secular culture, the rational human mind has virtually replaced God and no longer recognizes a dimension of reality beyond the material universe, nor any form of consciousness transcendent to its own. This materialist view of reality, presented as incontrovertible truth, presents one huge problem. We are the only sentient beings in a lifeless universe. As observers, we are separate from the life of nature and the life of the universe, which have no sentience between them. These beliefs offer no foundation for morality, which is increasingly vanishing from our world, and no foundation for relationship with the earth and the cosmos. They reduce us, as Yuval Harari has charmingly put it, to no more than hackable animals. Is it surprising that so many people are showing symptoms of mental illness and are driven to drugs and suicide because they feel their lives have no meaning and no value? According to the psychiatrist Dr. Ian McGilchrist, who has many brilliant talks on YouTube, we have become prisoners of the literal left hemispheric mind, which over centuries and millennia has gradually closed down access to the imaginative right hemisphere and has led to the disastrous misinterpretation of reality that is reflected in scientific materialism. And I'm sure that all of you in the audience know Dr. McGilchrist's books, The Master and His Emissary, and the most recent one, The Matter with Things. I won't spend time explaining this because you can look it up on Google to find a map of the 2 hemispheres. Now, if there is a single idea that is facilitating subjugation of nature and the devastation of the planet, it is the belief that the earth has no consciousness and that we are separate from its life. However, we are now beginning to awaken to a totally different relationship with the earth. Birthing a new story is an evolutionary imperative at this time of unprecedented crisis. A new story that can free us from the scientific beliefs and the left hemispheric perspective that have increasingly imprisoned us. Without this awakening, we have no future as a species, and probably we'll have a few hundred years, and that's all. Imagine the planet with a ring of light around it, composed of all the people who are trying to bring this new paradigm or this new view of reality into being, with the relationship with the earth at the heart of it. Now, I've described to you at great length the pathology of the solar phase of separation and a patriarchal order that had no connection with the feminine, indeed, that had the greatest contempt for it. We have had a religion story and a science story, neither of which has given a complete picture of our origins, our nature, and our role or destiny on this planet. At this time of supreme crisis, something is beginning to shift in our species, and the soul of humanity is stirring to life from its long trance-like sleep. The feminine archetype is coming back into our consciousness, bringing with it a new revelation, symbolized by the woman standing in front of the tree of life, holding a child, and painted by my husband. As this soul impulse gathers momentum, the marriage of our rational mind with our long silent soul is beginning, just beginning, to change our perception of reality. So how do we recover our lost sense of being part of something totally sacred? In chapter 10 of my book, The Dream of the Cosmos, I have defined the feminine as a totally different worldview or paradigm of reality, a perspective that regards this planet as part of a sacred cosmic order, whose precious life we are meant to protect and to serve, not to exploit. The feminine requires a radical transformation of our understanding of life and our relationships, relinquishing the millennia-long struggle for power between nations and manifesting as a new planetary consciousness which recognizes the interconnection and interdependence of all aspects of life, including ourselves. Like the magma of the Earth's core, the long-repressed feminine principle is rising to meet the masculine one in response to a deep soul impulse to balance and marry these archetypal energies within ourselves and within our world in order to create a new kind of civilization, one that is not destroyed by rivalry between nations, but is raised to a higher level by cooperation between them in service of the planet. We tread a path which is on the knife edge between birthing this new vision and regression into barbarism, perhaps the annihilation of our species on the other. Now I'm coming to a totally different subject, which is quantum physics. A door is opening onto a new story, which astonishingly is coming to us from unified physics, as defined by physicist and cosmologist Nassim Haramein, who says this: a new cosmology is being born, a new vision of our profound relationship with a conscious, intelligent, and interconnected universe. He compares the astounding recent scientific discoveries to the unfolding of the petals of a rose, like the one in this picture. The revelation of our profound connection to the deepest ground of life and to each other could have a powerful influence on how we live our lives, how we relate to the planet, and how we interact with each other, recognizing that our every act and even our every thought has an effect on the underlying intelligent field. Unified physics tells us that the whole universe is a unified field, a cosmic web of life which connects all life forms in our universe and on our planet. Every atom of life interacts with every other atom, no matter how great the distance between them. All this is recent discoveries, which is so fantastic. None of us is truly separate from others or from other species of life on this planet, or from the life of the 2 trillion, I think it is, not billion, galaxies of the universe. I should have changed billion to trillion. It's up on Google as trillion. The soul is the cosmic sea of being, or the subtle field underlying and connecting all these aspects of reality. This new quantum cosmology shows us that the material world exists within a stupendous field of consciousness that is the ground state of the universe. Our human consciousness is part of the consciousness which sustains not only our world, but the entire universe. Each one of us carries the holographic imprint of the universe within us, which is miraculous in itself. I don't understand it, but that is apparently a fact. No matter what our race, nation, gender, or caste, each one of us is a part of the living, breathing, connecting web of life which underlies and connects all life forms in the universe and on our planet. I call this web of life the soul of the cosmos, but scientists prefer to use the scientific word field, which is perfectly natural for them to do that. Now, quantum physics tells us that our world of matter, there's no slide I could find to illustrate this, is like a visible foam resting on a very deep ocean of light that permeates every cell of our being. We are not only connected with each other through the astonishing reach of the internet, but through the infinitesimal particles of subatomic matter that are non-locally connected with each other throughout the universe. In our essence, we are beings of light, cosmic beings, incarnated on this planet for an evolutionary purpose. And we've probably had many, many lives, even thousands of lives here before this one. All life at the deepest level is essentially one, and each of us is an expression of that one and inseparable from it. The realization that we participate in a cosmic consciousness that is the source and ground of our own consciousness is shattering the belief that material reality is all there is, that we exist in a randomly created universe, that our consciousness ends with the death of the physical body, and there is no life beyond death. These discoveries challenge the assumption that we humans are the only conscious beings in the universe, and that we are separate from it and from the life of all species on this planet, and that the universe is without life, intelligence, purpose, or meaning. In the nick of time, we are moving from a story of a dead, insentient universe to a universe that is vibrantly alive and the ground of all that we call life. The new story gives us a new image of God or spirit, which I've described in chapter 17 of my book, The Dream of the Cosmos. The old image of God as a distant male creator in a place called heaven is undergoing an alchemical transformation. God or spirit or divine mind may be the invisible ground of the entire manifest universe and the ground of our own consciousness. That is, if you believe in God as I do. Divine mind may not be separate and distant from us. We may be within it, coexisting and co-creating with it. This to me is one of the great revelations of our time. If God or spirit is the intelligence and the creative energy of the life process itself, pulsing forth at every instant in every region of this vast universe, then how we treat so-called inanimate matter, planetary life, and each other becomes a matter of how we are treating God. In splitting the atom and creating weapons of mass destruction, and in killing others who are our soul brothers and sisters, we are mutilating and desecrating the body of God. Now, I want briefly to summarize the quintessence of Nassim Haramein's discoveries, which are not only his, but many other cosmologists and physicists as well. He says that beneath the visible universe is an underlying electromagnetic field or matrix, like a fabric woven of energy, or a lattice or a web. There is no such thing as empty space. Space is full and it is seething with energy. We can't separate consciousness from this field because the field itself is consciousness, imprinting, exchanging, and transmitting information every nanosecond. Consciousness orders and organizes the field and its complex interconnected systems at all levels, and the universal and the evolution of the universe itself. We are part of this stupendous organization of energy, part of that consciousness. In the words of physicist and cosmologist Dr. Jude Currivan, we don't have consciousness, we are consciousness. We don't have consciousness, we are consciousness. And he says that we can't really separate so-called inanimate matter, animate self-organizing systems like plants and animals, and self-aware organisms like ourselves. All may come to be seen as integrated components of a continuous evolutionary path of information or consciousness, growing and unfolding through what we call time. And he says that the entirety of space-time is full of fields, from the electromagnetic field of a single atom to that of each cell in our body, to the heart's electromagnetic field, to the fields of the Earth or the Sun and the 200 trillion galaxies. The whole of what we call space is full of electromagnetic fields of different magnitudes interacting with each other. Even the atom is a field, and the proton and electron within it are also fields. And this diagram shows the extent of the electromagnetic field of the heart, which is connected to the electromagnetic field of the Earth when we are connected to our heart. And the HeartMath Institute gives exercises on how to connect with our heart, which are very effective and helpful. Now, he says that there are 100 trillion cells in our body and 100 trillion atoms in every one of these 100 trillion cells. Each one of these atoms contains a proton, and each proton holds trillions of Planck units. Everything is connected through these Planck units. Now, the size of a Planck unit is like a grain of sand compared to the size of the whole universe. That takes some assimilating. Untold numbers of these electromagnetic oscillators constitute the ground of the material universe. All so-called matter is made out of protons and these infinitesimal Planck units. And it's through the Planck units that we are connected to each other and to the entire cosmos. These basic particles in the field are oscillating and vibrating so rapidly that there is no apparent space between them. And this electromagnetic oscillation is the ground state of the entire universe. This oscillation is so rapid that it makes matter appear to us as a steady state. We can't see the vibrations of the minute Planck units. All these Planck units, protons, atoms, and cells are connected to each other and to every observer in the universe, forming a sort of stupendous field of energy in a continuous state of oscillation. And they produce a holographic structure and an incredible dynamic wormhole-like network which connects all points across scales, generating a connected, living universe. Now, supposing we all knew this, supposing this was taught in schools and universities, it would make a huge difference to our understanding of our connection with each other. Supposing Putin knew about this, he wouldn't be able to invade Ukraine. Suppose America knew about it, or China, but they don't. And so we're stuck with what we've got coming from the past, and we can't get into what we want for the future. Now, I've put the image of Christ here, who represents the awakened state of cosmic consciousness that we're all moving towards. Quantum physics is revealing to us what Jesus was teaching 2,000 years ago, that we cannot separate matter and spirit, that we are all connected to each other and to the divine ground, which he called the Father. Sometimes also he called it the Mother. I can't tell you what it's in at the moment because there's no time. He told people not to kill because to take the life of another is breaking the law of life. He said we cannot serve two masters, God and Caesar. And he called Caesar the ruler of the world. That's the term he uses, the ruler or master of the world. The ruler of the world is the will to power that we can see magnified in Putin, as well as in America, China, and the giant corporations of the West, which usurp the power that is God's. There never has been a more terrible time of persecution, war, and suffering than the last 2,000 years of Christianity. Christ did not usher in a new era through his sacrifice. We are still stuck in the old patterns because we have not begun to understand his message. Yet the way the new consciousness is arising is very similar to what happened in early Christian communities before the Emperor Constantine took over Christianity in the 4th century and made it part of the empire. These words from a recent book by Christopher Beisch, recording his psychedelic visions over a 20-year period, give us a small glimpse of what is happening beneath the surface of our culture. And I would urge you to read his book, which is called LSD and the Mind of the Universe, Christopher Beisch. The great difficulty I have is describing the enormity of what is being birthed. The true focus of this creative process is not individuals, but all humanity. It is actually trying to awaken the entire species. What is emerging is a consciousness of unprecedented proportions, the entire human family integrated in a unified field of awareness, the species reconnected with its fundamental nature, our thoughts tuned to source consciousness. This unified field did not suffocate individuality, but liberated it into new orders of self-expression. The scale of what I was witnessing took my breath away. I saw humanity climbing out of a valley, and just ahead on the other side of the mountain was a brilliant, sun-drenched world that was about to break over us. The time frame was enormous. After millions of years of struggle and ascent, we were poised on the brink of a sunrise that would forever change the conditions of life on this planet. All current structures would quickly become irrelevant. All truths would quickly be rendered passé. Truly, a new epoch was dawning, and the lives of everyone living in this pivotal time in history were helping to bring about this global shift. Now I'm coming to the end. So I would sum up by saying divine spirit, this is my own personal view, is the core of our being, and the soul is the intermediary between spirit and body. The body is the temple of the soul and the means of our being able to incarnate on this planet. Without the body, we can't do it. At the same time, it offers us access to the many dimensions of the inner universe and the experience of the divine spirit within us. The more we develop the capacity for love and reverence for life, the more we are in touch with this divine spirit. And what Jesus called the kingdom of heaven within us and around us. So the new story is about relinquishing the fear of death, knowing that we survive death and that we are in our essence immortal beings. And the new story tells us that cosmic light and love are the foundation of our being, of our consciousness, our intelligence, and our capacity for love. So imagine this new revelation being born in our heart, like the unfolding petals of a rose. The forgotten vision of the lunar era is returning to us at a higher turn of the spiral of evolution. We need to connect with who we truly are and hold the highest possible vision of what we want for the life of this planet. If the whole universe is one integrated living organism, one symphony of cosmic sound, then we are part of that whole. And like the rose, we participate as co-creators in the unfolding of our life in this miraculous evolutionary process. At the heart of the cosmos is a love of unimaginable dimensions, a love that created and sustains the entire universe and is the origin of our own capacity to love and to create. To know this is to enable us to heal the pathology of the past, and to know this is the secret longing of the life that lives us. So thank you very much.
Okay, my goodness. I'd like you to each, before we get up and move around, take a minute to go inside and just be quiet and to let the images go through you, let the ideas go through you. And there may be one or two images, thoughts, ideas, whatever, that came out of this talk that I hope that you will bring to the breakout groups we're going to have. We're going to have two breakout groups, one after another. I don't know, about 5 or 6 people in each with a facilitator. And because we've been sitting passively, taking in and listening, I'm going to urge you to take a 2 to 3 minute break, go to the bathroom, get up, move around, just stretch, take a few deep breaths, and then Andy is going to put us in breakout groups. So I will see you all in various ways. We'll come back together as a whole after the breakout groups, but take a moment to stretch and then come back and you'll be assigned. Thank you.
Not being afraid of death, we mentioned that, we talked about that, and people shared about that, and whether death was actually a passage into something else. And also there was some talk about just analysis about the film itself and how it was a lot of words, and it would have been nice to have space and more images in it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Judy, your group. Judy, you're muted.
We shared quite a bit. One of the questions I opened with is, how does a person in the group experience this participatory consciousness that she talked about? And there was a whole variety from being in nature, dog walking, pulling a tarot card every day, certainly tracking dreams and having an awareness that there's something else beyond that little yellow triangle at the top, sand play, qigong, and meditators. Several people meditate, and anybody else that I missed in our group? There was also scent, I guess. There was one fence sitter and one person who doesn't believe in the cosmic consciousness. So that was good because we had diversity and a little electricity in our group, a little twinging of the cosmic web. And I ended with someone shared about how in some of the Eastern religions there's talk of cosmic consciousness, but there's not talk of shadow. So that, and coming full circle back to that, I was wondering about how she ended with love. Like love is a way, that we will open to this extraordinary field. And I was just curious what she means by love.
Mm-hmm. Lisa, do you want to say something about our group?
I was afraid you would ask. My memory is not the greatest right now. Oh dear. So I thought it was wonderful to hear people's connections. Let's see what I can remember. One participant spoke about how to translate some of these insights to a relative living in Ohio with very different kind of frame of mind, that their only Zoom connection has been, I think, a rifle club, that kind of how do we connect? And so, trying to think about this field and how to communicate that maybe to others as we move forward in this way. And let's see. Another individual spoke about military background and really just that kind of that connection with that whole mentality of power and conquest, and how that was something that he'd actually really experienced, and this this movement away from that as well, or opening to something beyond that, being quite meaningful. And I spoke a bit about a connection to reopening that connection to the land and communication, kind of direct communication, that kind of loss of sort of intuitive and psychic connection she spoke about from the old Europe. And how are we to do that now, and developing that intuition again, and a practice that I've been doing in nature and connecting to nature. It's actually a stream behind my house that I go to regularly. Spoke a bit about that and how important that is to me right now. And then a gentleman afterwards who works with authentic movement was very supportive and validating about his own connection with nature, and how he has practices when he enters nature, including one, noticing what you're noticing in nature, but then also taking some time to be noticed by, or if I'm probably getting the words wrong, but to have the sense of being taken in by nature as well, kind of feeling that relationship.
Mhm.
We talked about those practices. And then Penny was going to share something with us, and we ran out of time. So I'm intrigued. That'll have to be another.
I shared the film with you.
Did I do all right? Did I miss anything?
You were great. You were great. Thank you, Lisa. Chris, how about your group? I can't hear you.
I'm happy to share what members of our group spoke about. I'm afraid we
This does not have to be perfect. This is just
we were frustrated by lack of time, and there was so much more that we wanted to share. So is it okay if I say people's names? Or I don't have to, but anyway, I will. So Sylvia started by sharing about research that she's been doing into the biblical Sarah for many years, I think. And so that part of Anne Baring's story was especially of interest to her. And there's a lot more that we could delve into about that specifically. Jane, I share with you the sense of kind of overwhelm. There was the trajectory of this huge, swath of history was a little overwhelming. And someone else in the group just said that she felt a great sadness.
Mhm.
And I really felt that too, just such a sadness. Someone else, their sadness was kind of channeled into anger and irritation as she was watching. The more she was watching it, the more angry and irritated she was becoming, realizing that we've really known all this stuff. We've known it for a long time. It's not, it's not, hasn't just happened. And yet, we keep kicking the can down the road. So what else? One of our group is a pianist and composer, and just is feeling the effects of patriarchy on women in the arts, and the kind of outrage around that, and the need obviously for feminine wisdom in all areas of life and culture. And our one man in the group spoke to really kind of a male perspective on feeling sometimes frustrated by the sort of patriarchal dominance, and that he sees that as a sign of inferiority, which I thought was interesting. That hadn't really come out in the film at all. But another group mentioned kind of opposites. So there's a sort of oppositional thing going on there, I think. That's really kind of.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah,
the waterfront.
that's fine. Ed, if you just take a minute or so, and 'cause I
Sure, thank
have
you,
a
Penny.
minute or so. Yeah.
I can do it quickly for our group. Except for Carol, thank you, Carol, for holding this shadow. Our group was drunk on enthusiasm. Everybody felt really drunk on the vision of unity, rejoicing that modern science, which broke us away from the whole, is circling back to restore us to the whole. joyous that the ancient spiritual vision and the modern scientific vision are coming together and affirming that many of us are dreamers and deeply connected to nature, and we have had experiences of unity and connection from early life till now, and that those experiences and practices are becoming more commonplace, and we're all more comfortable talking about them and being in community with them. And Carol just held the balance for us about the terribly hard times we've all been through and will continue for a while. So while we're joyous with enthusiasm and hope and spirit, we're also realistic and struggling together and have to be in the struggle for a long time.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you all for coming.
Penelope, Sylvia has her hand raised.
Sylvia, I don't see you, but go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much.
There you are.
I just wanted to offer a way to connect to some of these concepts through our dreams. I host a group dream about 4 times a year around the equinox and solstice, where we dream together for global healing. It's on Facebook. Unfortunately, I say just because Facebook, but it works. It's a private group on Facebook. There are about 1,000 of us from around the world. And I just want to invite you all, if you're interested, just contact me or just go look. Andrew's going to share the link, or he did share the link in the chat. Just give it a try. It's free. It's not selling anything. It's an opportunity to set our intention together to dream for global healing in the face of the climate crisis. And it felt so integrated with tonight's talk that I felt moved to share that with you. And I appreciate the opportunity to do so.
Thank you very much, Sylvia. I remember sitting in a cafe with you. It feels like 100 years ago.
I know, that was so nice.
Well, thank you all. And it's possible that we'll invite Anne Baring to present some of her work going forward perhaps on a Sunday in the winter, because as new work comes out, this is an elder. This is a 91-year-old woman who's just, so gifted. And if we get a chance to invite her to present her work for herself, we'll let you know. But you can also go to her site, www.annebaring.com, and you can see a number of her talks and whatnot. But she is a real treat, a really beautiful soul. And her left hemisphere is highly developed, as you can see. I have a history of trauma, so my left hemisphere works very differently, but I have an overdeveloped right hemisphere, which I'm very proud of, because it really puts me in touch with the relational field and the ancient ways and art and creativity and poetry. And it's kind of a direct route to the soul. So I'm happy for Anne to use her wisdom and experience to prepare such beautiful works for us. So hope you'll come. Erica, what is next meeting? What is that? You want to just reiterate the next presenter? I believe it's Ed's.
Chris, do you have that?
It's Miguel Rivera,
Okay.
and he is speaking on returning to the roots, and the idea that we've been so separated from nature, which Anne was just talking about, how to rituals of reconnecting using a lot of Native American shamanistic processes.
So we invite you to come and kind of continue this into listening to someone different from Anne, and from a dominant white culture. And so we welcome others. So good night to all. Watch your
The link to PayPal isn't working for me. I don't know if it is for others.
I've had problems.
To what? What did you have problems with?
The link to PayPal. I just tried it and it didn't work.
Oh, can we put that in again or something, Andy? Can we try that again?
It works on the website.
Oh, go to the website. Okay, I could do that. Thanks.
Okay, thank
What's
you.
the-
Take good care.
Excuse me, what's the date of the Mr. Rivera?
November 4th.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All
All
right.
right,
Thank you
thanks.
for coming,
Thank you. Thank you.
Nice to
Good to
see
see
you.
you.
Alton.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Thank
Penny.
you. That was beautiful.
Bye.
Thanks again.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Penny.
You're
Thanks, Penny.
welcome.
Thanks.
Thank you, everybody. Good to see you.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Alton.
Bye.
Bye, Carol.
Hi, Erica.
Hi, Erica and Jude.
Karen.
Bye, Jane.
Bye, John Boy.
Alan, I haven't seen you in a while. It was good to hear from you.
Yeah.
Bye, Jane.
Bye, Karen. Bye. Thank you, Penny.
Feel better, Erica.
What?
Feel better.
Thank you. I'm getting a little fluish, but I'm fine.
Yeah, right. Okay. Andy, thank you.